events like this to bring people together from all over the world around issues of nuclear weapons abolition, but also to connect that issue with all the other issues that are facing humanity in all of our countries around the world.
Amen.
To make those connections. This is what Peace and Planet is trying to do. So welcome. I have to make a real thank you, and I'm not sure he's here, but I'll put it on the record, to Jonathan Fluck from the Brooklyn Friends meeting. He's the one who arranged for us to have this space. So I'd like to give him a hand. I hope he can hear it wherever he is. So the next thing I would like to do is to acknowledge some of the delegations that came from halfway around the world, from Japan. We saw them march with us yesterday, and many of them are here today. I would like to have the delegation from Jensweeken, if they could stand up. So please stand up from, this is Jensweeko, and also from Jensweeken. Can you also stand up, please? Where are my friends? Where are you? Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you for visiting our office and spending time with the students who are visiting the United Nations. They really appreciate that. And for all of the programs that you've allowed us to participate in, thank you so much. Okay. There's another person I specifically want to mention. There are two other Habakasha who are in the room tonight, so I would like them to each stand up. One is on the panel. You don't need to stand up right now. You'll be speaking. But Tadako Kawasoe, could you please stand up? Tadako is the vice chairperson of the A-Bomb Survivors Liaison Council of Nagasaki Peace Action Center and the vice chairman of Nagasaki Congress Against A and H Bombs. Thank you for coming all this way. Now, please, Wada Masako, where are you? Ah, there you are. Thank you for coming, Wada. And Wada is a Nagasaki survivor also, Assistant Secretary General of Hidankyo, Japan Confederation of A and H Bomb Sufferers Organization. Thank you so much, and for speaking yesterday at the march. Your presence here is very important. So we're going to start right away with our first panel, which is a panel about it's called Survivors Resist, the humanitarian consequences. This emphasis on humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons is one of the things that has brought us together because the United Nations has spent the last 3 or 4 years focusing on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. And as a result, we have them now negotiating the nuclear weapons ban treaty. So there's many survivors that are involved, not just the Nagasaki and Hiroshima survivors. And you are going to hear about that today. The survivors of the way our foreign policy, of the whole supply chain involved with nuclear weapons, of the indigenous people who are affected by our foreign policy. So please listen. The first speaker will be Mamako Toshioki. He is from Hidankyo, the Japan Confederation of ANH bomb sufferers. He was born in Tokyo on March 15, 1942. In March 1945, he moved to his father's hometown, Hiroshima, with his family. His father was exposed to the atomic bomb while working at the Hiroshima station on August 6th. He entered the ground zero area where his family was trying to find his father, and he was exposed to radiation. He started to work as a turner in 1961, and after retirement, he became a town councilor until 2013. In the meantime, he joined the local Hibakusha movement in 1999. He went to New York twice to participate in the 2010 and 2015 Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conferences, where he shared his story with citizens and students in New York. He is presently working as Vice President of Hiroshima Prefectural Hidankyo, an Executive Board member of the Japan Confederation of ANH Bomb Sufferers Organization. So at this point, I would like to turn the podium. Are you going to speak from here? Okay, please come up. Thank you.
Give me that rubber band, old buddy.
Yep. Sorry, 1 second.
I'll do it right now.
Okay. He's over there. Good, thank you very much.
Okay, good. Yeah.
いいですか？私は広島から来ました被爆者です。名前を俊之美巻と申します。皆様方の前で発言させていただく機会に恵まれましたことを感謝いたします。1941年12月8日、旧日本軍によってハワイ・パールハーバーへの奇襲攻撃で日米が戦争となりました。私はこの奇襲攻撃について日本の一市民として謝罪をいたします。それから3ヶ月後に私は生まれました。
Good morning. My name is Mimaki Toshiyuki, Hiroshima survivor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. Before I talk about my experience of the atomic bombing in Hiroshima, as one of the citizens of Japan, I would like to apologize to the people of the United States for Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December the 8th, 1941, during the World War II. I was born in Tokyo 4 months after this attack. On March the 10th, 1945, when I was 3 years old, Tokyo suffered the greatest air raid ever. Almost 100,000 people were killed by the fire bombings by the US military overnight. Our family decided to leave Tokyo and evacuated to Hiroshima, my father's hometown. The following month, in May and June, the US troops landed on Japan's southernmost island of Okinawa, and fierce battle was fought between the US and Japan. The fight caused the death of 1 in every 4 citizens of Okinawa. At 8:15 a.m. on August the 6th, the US dropped an atomic bomb over Hiroshima city. It exploded 600 meters above the ground. With enormous blast and intense heat rays, buildings were smashed and destroyed. Many people were killed instantly by the blast or trapped under the fallen buildings and were burned to death in the conflagration that engulfed the entire city. About 140,000 people were killed by the end of that year in Hiroshima. Then at 11:02 a.m. on August the 9th, another atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. About 70,000 people were killed in Nagasaki during the same year. My father was a railway employee and worked at a Hiroshima station, which was about 2 kilometers from Ground Zero. Fortunately, he survived as he was in the underground space that morning. When he came out on the ground, he almost went out of his mind to witness the unprecedented destruction. There was a sea of fire all around, and many people burned to death while lying scattered on the ground. It was literally a hell on earth. He saw buildings all burned, some people with protruding eyes or others with burnt hair and barely breathing. He said he was in a panic, not knowing what to do. On that day, I was playing outside in front of our house, which was quite far away from the city center. I only remember the bright flash in the afternoon. In the afternoon of that day, I saw people floating past our house, but there was no way of knowing that they were the victims of the A-bomb. I remember one woman in tattered clothes dropped in at our house. She showed a can and asked, "Will you please open this?" My mother opened it using a can opener and put the food in a bowl for her. Long after the woman left us, my mother told me, "I'm afraid she might have died." My father did not come home that night. Carrying my baby brother on her back and taking me by the hand, my mother asked a military truck to take us to go to Hiroshima station in search of him. The road was blocked halfway, and we had to walk into the city. But with fires raging and seeing so many dead bodies scattered on the ground, our search was in vain. With no idea whereabouts we were walking, my mother gave up on him, and we went back home exhausted. Hiroshima was burned to ashes, and so many people perished. In subsequent years, those who were exposed to the A-bomb radiation died one after another, and those who were survived are still suffering from its after effects. Fortunately, my father finally came home 3 days later. I am sure that when we looked for him in the city center, we were exposed to much radiation. My father died of prostate cancer. My mother for many years suffered from liver disorder and died of uterus cancer.
核兵器を将来の核兵器廃絶を将来の課題としてはいけません。先送りしてはいけません。核保有国の傘の下にあると言われている日本をはじめとする国々は段階的に核兵器を削減するのが現実的だと言っています。3月に始まった核兵器を禁止し廃絶を目指す条約を作るための国連会議に参加しませんでした。段階的とは今後何年かけて実現しようというのでしょうか。私たち被爆者が一人もいなくなる未来のことですか。
Abolition of nuclear weapons must be achieved without delay, not in an indefinite future. The nuclear weapon states and nuclear umbrella states, including Japan, have not taken part in the nuclear weapon in the UN negotiation conference on the nuclear prohibition treaty, saying that step-by-step reduction of nuclear weapons should be the realistic approach. But how many more years do they think we'll need to accomplish it? If it takes a long time, none of the Hibakusha will be alive. All of us can live only once. The weight of your life and my life is the same and equal. The life of the Hibakusha lost by the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki cannot be revived. I urge the leaders of world superpowers, please don't use nuclear weapons as a political card. You should come to Hiroshima and visit the Peace Memorial Museum to know the inhumanity of nuclear weapons.
私たち被爆者は昨年4月以来、核兵器を禁止し廃絶する条約をすべての国が結ぶよう呼びかける国際署名に取り組んでいます。日本および世界から寄せられた国際署名は、核兵器のない世界を望む人々の心からの叫びです。現在行われている国連交渉会議で立派な核兵器禁止条約を誕生することを強く期待し、私の訴えを終わります。ノーモア被爆者、ノーモア長崎、ノーモア広島、ノーモアウオー。サンキュー。
Since April last year, we the Hibakusha have been working on the international signature campaign, urging national governments to conclude a treaty to prohibit and eliminate nuclear weapons. These signatures collected in Japan and around the world represent the heartfelt appeal of the people who aspire for a nuclear weapon-free world. I strongly hope that the ongoing UN negotiation conference will successfully conclude a convention on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There is a write-up of the story that was told here. There were copies here. I think we might have, here we go. Can we use this? Okay. Can I get some help, somebody to pass these out around while I'm introducing the next speaker? So I hope you'll take one home as a memory of what you heard. Okay, our next speaker is someone that I know from her work at the Iraq Veterans Against the War, where Peace Action New York State has an office. And she's an amazing woman. And I'm so glad that she's here today. Iram Ali was born in rural Pakistan and grew up in Brooklyn. So this is her hometown. Her experiences as an immigrant, woman of color, growing up in an increasingly inhospitable and Islamophobic atmosphere have greatly shaped her passion for social justice, including immigrant rights, women's rights, and Black liberation. Intersectionality between oppressions is a key focus for Iram. She consistently seeks to center marginalized identities as a pathway to justice and collective liberation through a decolonial and anti-racist lens. Iram is currently a campaign manager at MoveOn.org after completing her Kairos Fellowship. She has led campaign tactics around the Flint water crisis, that's Flint, Michigan in the US, and worked to provide protest support to various student and immigrant groups as they chose to take a stand against Trump's hate and bigotry. Before moving to MoveOn.org, she was an associate director at Iraq Veterans Against the War, a nonprofit organization seeking to dismantle U.S. militarism. Iram has organized educational panels on topics ranging from Muslim narratives to framing Islam, challenges of Islamophobia, and Orientalism. She is also a published essayist and first-degree black belt. I also consider her a poet, but you didn't put that in your bio. So please come up.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you for having me here. I just want to start off by saying this is a panel of survivors, but I personally have not experienced war firsthand, although as a Muslim in the United States, we do face anti-Muslim policies.
Go closer to the mic, really, like.
Okay, is this better?
Kissing it, almost.
Yes, okay. Closer?
Yeah, like as if you're almost
Okay,
kissing
great.
it. Yeah.
So I will be speaking on what has happened so far in terms of our wars abroad and how they impact immigration and policies here within the United States. So in 2012, in Northwest Waziristan, which is located in Pakistan, a drone strike killed a grandmother and also targeted 2 of her children who were out in the garden. And her children's names were Nabila and Zubair. The grandmother ultimately ended up dying immediately, while Nabila and Zubair were treated for their wounds. Their father, who was a school teacher, was visiting his sister because it also happened to be a Muslim holiday the day that the drone struck. And in 2013, both of these teenagers, Nabila, Zubair, and their father, Rafiq, came to the United States to speak in front of Congress. Unfortunately, 2013, this was the Obama years, so many people assumed that the wars were over. Like, nobody really had a focus on anti-war mobilizations, despite the fact that Obama actually increased drone strikes tremendously and actually expanded executive powers to carry out war in various countries. So Nabila and Zubair actually spoke in front of a relatively empty Congress, which is unfortunate. And one thing that Zubair said that stuck with me was, I no longer love blue skies. In fact, I now prefer gray skies. The drones do not fly when the skies are gray. So think about that. Because of our drones and our warfare, children no longer love blue skies. Back in 2014, Glenn Greenwald wrote, "Empires bomb who they want, when they want, for whatever reason." And that really stuck with me because it's like we don't, as the United States, as the powerful police that we consider ourselves, we don't need a reason to invade and bomb countries. And in the past 15 years, the US has bombed 7 majority Muslim countries, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Iraq, and Syria. What's most potent is this guise of humanitarianism with which we bomb countries. And it's that irony that's the most hard to internalize. So we invaded Afghanistan because of the Taliban, but also under the guise of feminism, right? Because we wanted to save Muslim women. And this pushed us into war by not only Republicans, but Democrats as well. So when we're in states of war, what happens is these policies become bipartisan. There is support for war and there is support for like anti-Muslim policies across partisan lines. But when it comes to the consequences of war, we turn a blind eye. Nobody wants refugees from those very countries that we've bombed and destabilized. And in fact, refugees become antagonists, right? They're not the victims of our policies, that's not how they're portrayed, but they become reasons for why we invaded those countries, and they become a threat to us, which is highly, highly ironic. And it's easier to think about the consequences of war in purely a physical sense in terms of casualties. So millions of people have died over the past 15 years directly due to our warfare. But we also need to think of the consequences of the psychological impact this is having on an entire generation of children growing up in the middle of war, who instead of being let in as refugees are now being turned away and instead are considered threats. So just as like a top line, the number of refugees that we accept was capped by the Obama administration at 110,000. Through his Muslim ban, Trump wanted to decrease that to 50,000 people. Meanwhile, Germany has taken in about like 800,000 refugees, and it's a much smaller country. Lebanon, which is even smaller than Ireland, has taken in 1.5 million refugees, right? So just the comparison point in terms of the amount of resources we have versus the countries that have taken in a significant amount of refugees. What's also worth noting is that the Muslim ban that was passed by Trump, with the exception of Sudan and Iran, banned all of the countries, or most of the countries that we've already bombed. And that ban also applied to people trying to immigrate here, not just refugees. So people who have legitimate visas to come here for school or for business, they would not be allowed in because of that ban. Fortunately, it's been blocked by several courts throughout the country, and right now it's actually heading to the US Supreme Court. What I find now is that there is a lot of support against anti-Muslim policies because of the Trump administration. So there was a protest recently and a photo went around, and it was a Muslim woman holding a sign that said, "If you don't want refugees, stop creating them," which I thought was a potent summary of what we're actually doing. And the answer is basically we need to stop edging toward more war, more invasions. Now the administration is looking at potentially getting into a conflict with Iran. They're slowly edging there. Tillerson has already come out saying we need regime change in Iran. And Iran just had a democratically held election where 75% of the population came out, compared to us where we can barely get 50 to 60% of the population that comes out. The last thing I want to mention in terms of policies in particular is as we're turning away refugees, mostly created by our own wars and involvement, we spend an estimated $80 billion a year on running federal and state prisons and local jails, right? So the US has less than 5% of the world population, but we have nearly 25% of its prisoners. And our policies, especially the ones that target Black and brown people, are waged inside and outside of this country. So we'd rather spend $80 billion a year running prisons and incarcerating more and more people based on like the war on drugs and other nonviolent offenses, rather than actually invest in our own communities, invest in schools, or take in refugees created by our own policies. And with the amount of money that's spent on prisons, we really wouldn't even have to pick and choose who we help, right? Like we could actually fix our own infrastructural problems and also aid in developing other countries that we had a direct hand in destabilizing. So the last thing I want to mention is our policies abroad inevitably trickle into the United States. So our police are being more militarized. And if you remember photos from Ferguson, everyone was saying like this looks like a war zone because it was a war zone. Police have like military grade weapons and vehicles that they are using against their own citizens, and that really needs to be stopped. So the last thing, the actual last thing, is when we talk about empire and the consequences of empire, I think we also need to mention that it functions to uphold white supremacy that predominantly harms Black and brown people. So even the countries that I read out in terms of the countries that we have bombed, they're in Africa, they're in the Middle East, and they're in South Asia. Yes, so that is it, and then I hope to have another conversation during our Q&A as questions come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Iram. Our next speaker is Kathy Sanchez from TEWA Women United. She is an Indigenous elder, a fierce activist and organizer who believes in beloved communities and in the culture of peace. She does activism on nuclear non-proliferation, human rights, and the rights of our Mother Earth, while integrating body, mind, and spiritual awareness into environmental justice, advocacy, policy change, and community education. She believes in intergenerational organizing and thinking holistically, thus deeply putting spiritual values into action for ending the culture of violence, especially environmental violence, and bringing in a holistic well-being for all in Mother Earth. And if you heard Kathy yesterday at the Women's March, you know what you're in for. So please come up.
Can I speak from right here? Okay, yeah, Gindi. First of all, I'd like to ask if there's any Indigenous people from this land here today. Is there anyone here? Could you please stand? Okay, in our traditional way, we're supposed to ask permission to speak and be on your land. So, Biagindi, I'm asking for your permission to go ahead and speak. Is that okay with you? Okay, good. So I'll say the opening in my TEWA language. Then nobody wake po about good to the no taki nobody added kaganamiri here miri isigi miri herawa he what the puri na mit awagi na binango chukuyowa he what in so gedi rockin da ho o rockin the hore he so pavayo katawa here. So I am Kathy Sanchez from San Ildefonso Pueblo in the northern parts of New Mexico, and my pueblo's land are sacred mountains in the Jemez area were the ones that were taken from us with an executive order where they created the first atomic and the hydrogen bombs. So we were the first casualties of war. We were the first ones to really have our people be the ones that carried out their cleanup without any security or without any means of knowing. And it was deliberately not knowing what was happening because of their secrecy in order to create that weapon of mass destruction. And so when the bombs were created there, everything was just dumped into the canyons, and our men were the ones that were bearing it and taking it away. But there were a lot of chemicals used during that time as well. And then our brothers and sisters down south in the Tularosa Basin area were the ones that had the experience of being bombed first. There were the bombs that were dropped on them as the experiment and the test. And again, they were not told anything about what was happening because of the secrecy and wanting to be the first strike tool for the United States. And so I brought materials here with me, and I will show them. So I do have a statement from the Tularosa Basin downwinders, and they did a health assessment survey, so I have that available for a handout. And they produced a health survey that says unknowingly, unwillingly, and uncompensated. So that's available on their website as well, because the government to this day has not acknowledged the people that they harmed there, and they are dying from all the nuclear diseases, the cancers, the tumors, and whole rows of towns have been decimated because it was all a secret. And we were going to show the video footage of that, finally unclassified footage of that first test bomb in that area in order for violence to exist. And that beast, or that a parasitical entity is still here, alive and well, especially strong in the United States, because that is what is still heading the game of blocking the United Nations states from coming together to declare that it's illegal, that it's unconstitutional, that it's should not be allowed as a tool to have the ability to kill in a massive, hideous way. And so a lot of the questions that we get as Native people is, how is it that if the whole populations of Indigenous people that were within these lands occupied now by the United States, we were annihilated, genocided to recover at 1%. So we have that trauma, we have the historical collective trauma as peoples. And that trauma is what we call soul wounding, because it's that positive energy that was trying to be killed and used. And so that soul wounding carried from one generation to the next, and then you get generational trauma. Because if we were never allowed to heal, if we were never compensated, if we were never told about what happened, and it was all because of power and control, then we pass that hurt wound to our generations. And it's exponential. Exponential meaning that it's like the disease itself, cancer. Cancer, if you have one wounded cell, it multiplies exponentially and all the cells around it are harmed as well. And so that happens to our psyche, our souls, just the same way, because that spirit of love has been trying to be genocided from the start to now. And so as Native peoples, we have what they call, oh, you're so resilient, you survived. Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you pissed off? Why aren't you just crazy? So as Native people, this is from the Mohawk Nation, and this is a prayer that they say, oh, already 2 minutes. I didn't even have the books. It's giving love and thanks. The children all read how to give love and thanks for waters, for foods, for the earth, for the sky, for the powers, for the abilities. That is what we need all our children to know, the culture of peace. It is not available in the United States to be talking about peace culture in the schools. And so then our children have made a book called Environmental Justice Adventures from an animal's point of view, what the lab has done, what the lab is doing, and why the animals are upset, and what we need to do to help them with their voice. So that's also available. And then because of the lab being there, they do have a lot of materials that's available of the environmental impact. Environmental impact is we're saying that as women, we are the first environment, and as women, we also know the love that Mother Earth has given us and what we as women carry and bear in giving life. And so it's no wonder that the culture of violence really targets wanting to do away with the women power, the women voice, the young girls having to be subjected to that violence. So we want to stop that. So in our curriculum as TEWA Women United, we have our braiding model where we braid in the environmental justice issues, the reproductive justice, and our culture of peace, and our beliefs and systems in our values. So I challenge all of you to look at what are your cultural values and beliefs that you adhere to, and don't let the culture of violence talk you out of those, because they are really essential to be a loving, caring, relational culture that we need at this time. And we put that love forward to our delegations there at the United Nations to have that belief, strength, and prayer, and that all our combined efforts will support them in staying strong in holding that culture of violence to the accountability of dismantling, doing away with nuclear arsenal. Time, okay. So I'll be available for questions, and you can go through the books as well. So with that, thank you very much.
So Tina Stege is a partner in Martina Corporation, a family firm based in the Marshall Islands. contemporary island issues and climate change, migration, sustainable development, education, and heritage. Tina also serves as educational liaison for the Marchallese Educational Initiative. It's a non-profit based in Springdale. Is that Arkansas? That's pretty far from the Marshall Islands. And that was created to blend scholarly research with practical outreach efforts to create awareness of Marchallese issues on a national stage while also making a real difference in the lives of individual Marchallese. Raised in Majura Atoll, Tina received her BA in sociology from Princeton University in 1997 and an MA in anthropology from the University of Aix-en-Provence in 2006. She worked for the RMI Embassy in Washington, D.C. for many years before leaving to focus on independent and community-based projects. She has worked on projects for the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, the U.S. Department of the Interior, the RMI government, the Asian Development Bank, and Greenpeace. Tina was instrumental in planning and served as the MC for MEI's Nuclear Remembrance Day in 2014, which was called Reflect Instrument, which I guess called Reflect, right? Yeah. Reflect, Honor, and Educate. In 2014 at the Clinton Presidential Library, that's where it was held. Representing civil society and MII, she addressed the General Assembly in the United Nations in September 2015 on the commemoration of the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. Most recently, she partnered with the American Museum of Natural History curator Dr. Jenny Newell on a project looking at community-based responses to climate change in the Marshall Islands. So I give you Tina Stege.
Yahweh is our greeting in Marchallese. It is also the word we use to say love. It is the word we use to say goodbye. And it actually, if you break apart the word, it's Ia, which is rainbow. Kwe means to you. It's our way of giving you a symbol of peace, a symbol of love. And so I wanted to begin my talk here today and echo what everybody on the panel has said. I really struck my heart what Kathy was saying about a culture of peace, and that these cultures, these are embedded in our cultures, this idea of peace and giving. I'm really honored to be here to share with you the stories of the Marchallese people, my people, and our experiences with nuclear testing. Over 70 years ago now, the United States government conducted the first of what would be 67 nuclear tests in my country. The impact of those tests, in particular Bravo, the Bravo shot that many of you may have heard of, was both violent and immediate. Islanders from Bikini, a word that Americans and people all over the world know, the one Marshallese word that everybody in the world knows. Islanders from Bikini and Inuitak left their ancestral homelands to scrape out an existence in new, often inhospitable environments as a result of those tests. The people of Rongelap and Udaruk, exposed to near fatal doses of radioactive fallout from the Bravo test, also left their home islands only to be returned prematurely to poisoned environments. For my generation and the generation and others who were born after the testing, the legacy of those 67 tests may not be as direct, but the impact remains as violent and destructive. And this is where I was really responding to what Kathy was saying. Some of you probably know this concept from Rob Nixon. It's called slow violence. And I feel like it very much applies to the Marshallese people and to all those people who are put in situations of ecological disasters that go over many, many generations, repercussions that unfold over decades and centuries. And this is a slow violence that's often invisible. The media latches on to these big events that, are bounded in one space and time. But slow violence captures the violence that media often doesn't respond to, that doesn't look at how things continue to impact people over decades and centuries, long after the bomb itself has been forgotten. But not in my country. We have not forgotten. Although my lineage links me to Wudruk, which is one of the 4 atolls that the US recognizes as affected by Bravo, and by the way, of the 67 tests, the US only recognizes that one, in fact, affected the health of the people in the Marshall Islands, and that was Bravo. My formative experiences learning about the testing were as a US college student who came to the United States to research and learn about my own history back in the islands, and then as a newly hired civil servant in the Marshall Islands government who was tasked with gathering oral histories from survivors and working with communities who were still living in exile from their home islands. Those experiences showed me the myriad ways in which Marchallese are affected by this slow violence that I talked to you about. Consider the Inuitak people who to this day live next to Runit Dome, which is a cement-capped nuclear waste site built by the United States that does not meet US safety standards for household trash. Or Marchallese men, women, and children with cancers who have no access to treatment because we do not have and never have had an oncologist in the Marshall Islands. It is shameful how limited healthcare options are for Marchallese people given our history. The Department of Energy provides medical care to people from Rongelap and Wudruk that they recognize as being exposed to fallout from the Bravo test. Everyone else is excluded. This includes people who were resettled on contaminated atolls. This includes people who were never evacuated from other atolls that were affected but not recognized as having been affected. This includes people who helped clean up the nuclear waste sites that were left behind by the testing. These people have to go to Hawaii or the mainland United States, and as you heard, we have a very large community, for example, in Springdale, Arkansas. They travel to these places to try to get the treatment that they need, only to find that we are labeled legally as non-immigrants, and so disqualified from any federally funded healthcare programs. Even among those clearly deserving of care, secrecy and obfuscation stands in the way of health and justice. Consider Rongelepese individuals enrolled without their knowledge in the DOE's Project 4.1. This is after the testing had started, which was a biomedical research program that studied the effects of radiation on human beings. One Rongelepese, Jaban Rikalang, has said, and I quote, "DOE put me in the 4.1 project. It was a guinea pig study of human beings, and now they cannot locate my file. Can somebody at least show me my medical records?" On the opposite side of the coin, my experiences also instilled in me a very great pride in the many heroes who made it their life's work to fight for justice and thus rendered the invisibility of this slow violence visible. These are people like Lijan Eknilang, some of you may know, who was a fierce advocate for the people of Rongelap and women throughout the Marshalls who had been afraid to share the pain of multiple miscarriages and the birth of jellyfish babies. Jellyfish babies is a term that came up in our language after the testing, because people didn't have any other way to explain what they were seeing. Lijan is known to people around the world for her work, but she died from complications of cancer in 2013. There are also people like John Milne, a Marchallese who worked on cleanup crews for the U.S. Department of Energy. He founded the Marshall Islands Radiation Victims Association to advocate for care and compensation for his fellow workers. He's hardly known outside of the Marshall Islands, but for me, he was one of the warriors in the fight to make the invisible visible, and he has also passed on. And there are those who continue to work tirelessly to bring Marshallese knowledge and truth about nuclear testing into the light. People like Tony DeBroom, many of you may already know. He's now the RMI's ambassador on climate change, but during his former tenure as foreign minister, a person who's instrumental in bringing the RMI's case against the world's nuclear powers to the international stage. We also have young people like Kathy Jetnell-Kitchener, who's a poet. They're using their art and creativity to forge a path towards social justice on nuclear issues and other issues like climate change that are grappling with this slow violence concept that I've been raising. And if you haven't heard Kathy's poetry, she's on YouTube. I encourage you to go check out her poems. She has one called Tell Them, which explodes with truth and power about the Marshallese experience. And this year, for the first time ever, our government organized a national conference on the RMI's nuclear legacy. For a long time, when I was growing up, people didn't talk about the nuclear experiences because we didn't know what to say. We didn't have the information. And that has changed. Speakers at this conference included a wide array of people with knowledge of the testing period and its impacts, both Marshallese and non-Marshallese. Called Charting a Journey Toward Justice, the conference was organized around March 1st, which is the anniversary of Bravo, and it's also our Nuclear Victims Remembrance Day in the Marshall Islands, a national holiday. Speaker after speaker spoke to the need for transparency and truth in achieving justice, and at that, Ambassador Tony DeBroom in his keynote actually opened this meeting with the mantra, quote, "There can be no closure without full disclosure." Here we are 70 years after the US nuclear testing period ended, and we still do not have all the facts. We need to have the information that the United States continues to withhold made public. Only with that can Marshallese make informed decisions on how to move forward. There was a UN Special Rapporteur report that came out in 2012 that advocated, in fact, for releasing all of the records that are still classified related to the testing in order to help the Marshall Islands move forward. I'd like to close with a couple of quotes. One is from Apili Hau'ofa, who's a Pacific Island scholar, and his writings have stirred the soul of many islanders. And he said, "If we're invisible, we can become dispensable." And another one of my heroes is Marshallese health educator and anti-nuclear activist, Darlene K.G. Johnson. She was also a cousin, and she's passed away from cancer. And she was instrumental in really blowing this up in the 80s when nobody wanted to talk about what was happening. And she said it's very simple, don't be a victim. So I want to say to you from the bottom of my heart, Komotada, thank you for being here to witness our stories. We have to hear these stories, we have to witness these stories that the knowledge lives on. It's a shared humanity. Whenever our shared humanity is diminished, then all of us are diminished. And the slow violence that threatens to harm the people of the Marshall Islands threatens us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tina. That was really amazing. We are running a little behind. There's a couple of things I just want to let you know. If you're very warm or you're feeling a little dehydrated, we have some water at the table in the center. So we're not going to take a break right now, but if you feel like you need water, I would invite you to get some water. It's warm today. The other thing is we have a special presentation. It's just going to take a minute. I would like to invite Haley Copley up to do it. It's a little not on your schedule. And while she's coming up, just wanted to say two things. I hope you're okay because we're running behind a little. We're not going to do the break that we had planned. We'll do our big break after the second panel, but we won't do a break between the first and the second panel. So just I wanted to let you know that we're going to do a Q&A in a moment. And before Haley speaks, I'm just going to sneak something in. Some of you are going to be around tomorrow, right? There is going to be a special nonviolent blockade in front of the U.S. mission tomorrow, Monday, June 19th. It's going to begin with a peace vigil and press conference at the Isaiah Wall, which is at 1st Avenue and 43rd Street at 11:30. Promptly at 12, we'll be walking to the U.S. mission, and there are a few people who will risk arrest in front of the U.S. mission because they feel the U.S. has enormous responsibility to be part of the UN negotiations. But for those who should not risk arrest, and I'm speaking to my international friends who need to go home, you know, there's no need to do that. So please I'm going to give the mic to Haley.
Hello, everyone. So I'm only going to take a second, but my name is Haley Copley, and I am a Tufts University student, and I am the co-founder and president of Tufts University Peace Action Chapter. Last summer I had the amazing privilege, thanks to the Shin Fujin organization, to attend the World Conference in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is the A and H bomb conference, and it completely changed my life. And it really inspired me and empowered me hearing all of the Hibakusha's stories to, you know, take their stories back home and like try and do something about it. So with that said, I joined the Tufts Japanese Culture Club, and I got really involved, and I used the experiences that I learned to have our organization, along with Peace Action at Tufts, to host an event. And we had a documentary screening and a fundraising. And it was a documentary called Paper Lanterns. And that night, the Tufts Japanese Culture Club and myself, I was there, we raised $375 US. So, so I'm here today because I had no idea how to get that money to Japan. And I knew that someone would be here this weekend, and I'm just so grateful to meet you. So here you go.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we want to start Q&A, and I'm going to, what I think I'd like to do is just get some hands of people that want to ask questions, and I will take your names. Can you raise your hand if you would like a question? And I'll take about, I think we have time for 4 questions? Huh? We have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to get 4 questions in, so we'll try to have a diverse, if you raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, so just shout out your first name. Joan, and shout out. Emmy? Okay. Shout out your first name. Eileen? Irene? Aria. Oh, right. Yes, I'm sorry. I can't see very well. One more. Any other questions? Have I missed anybody? Okay, so we're going to go with 3 questions. 3 questions. All right. Now, how are we going to do this to make sure we hear the question? have them, can you come up so we can? Hold on a minute, just a little logistical. Okay, just a minute, we're just working out. Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah. So, Joan?
Joan Russo from the Canadian Voice of Women. I was just at the ICANN session over at the Church Center, and they were talking about certain sections within the draft document. And there seem to be sections, it's 2 to 5, that are dealing with compensation, but it seems as though they're not dealing, I presume that compensation is for what has already happened, not about the future, what sort of compensation is going to be perceived to be necessary, because I think what those sections should be dealing with is the prevention so this never happens again. And I was a little puzzled because the section seems somewhat as though they're talking about, well, what will be the compensation in the future, and I think that would be flawed because we've got to make sure there's a precautionary principle and this will never happen again.
I think maybe your question is best answered at our last panel, because that's when we're actually going to talk about what's going on at the UN, if it's okay. But great for making this statement. Emmy?
Hi, I'm Emmy, and I'm a member of this meeting, and we have had the Hibachi here twice over the past several years. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you for sharing. And I'm just wondering if maybe you all can talk about how allied communities can support your work and take it out in our communities. I think it's very important for all people who have suffered as a result of white supremacy to be working together and supporting each other.
Okay, so how about we get 2 answers? Is that okay? Quick answers? I'm going to start, Iram, and then you pass it on.
Great question. I think especially right now, the silos that we've been in are being broken because we see the connections also between not only our history, but also the current conditions that our communities are facing. And I think one of the primary things that we can do, especially when it comes to violence, is like preventing immediate violence on our communities, right? So what does it mean to connect the anti-war movement with like the police brutality movement, right? And to make sure that people in both spaces are working together to prevent further violence in our communities. What does it mean to bring Indigenous communities into that fight to ensure that we know, like even as immigrants, we're imposing ourselves on a land that doesn't belong to us, right? Even having that knowledge is very important. So I think some of that work is already happening under our current administration, where people are noticing we can't do this alone, we can't continue to work in silos, we need each other to like understand our own struggles and also to move forward. So I think some of that is already happening.
And I believe that as Indigenous people, we've gone and know 4 levels of existence that have already come to an end, and this existence is coming to an end as far as Mother Earth cleansing herself. So the preparation is for us to be prepared for survival. And how do we love each other, to have food for each other, to have compassion for each other, to support each other, and to know that the culture of violence creates animosity between groups in order for us to be preoccupied with self-harm or self-hate, and then they still go ahead and do what they need to do to have all the land, all the amenities that they need in order to perpetuate their culture of violence. So it behooves us to know what it is that we value in our relational existence on this Mother Earth right now.
All right, thank you. So Ariel, do you want to come a little bit forward.
We have a lot of cord here, but it might make it a little easier. Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank you for all the work that you've done through your life to make the humanitarian consequences of all these aggressions known to people. I know it must be quite hard to testify always about that, but it's very necessary, and I think that's because of this work that we are now about to have a ban on nuclear weapons. So I'm sorry, I have two questions. One is for you. I've seen many different figures about the number of victims of drones. So I would like to know if you have an idea of what has really been happening, what is happening, because it's very hard to really know the truth about that. And I would like to know about the Marshall Islands. How would the case be reopened in a way by the Ban Convention, and how do you feel with the Ban Convention as being sort of an answer to the case that you put forward on the International Court of Justice? So not an answer, but let's say at least a benefit from all this advocacy. So I would like to know where it is and how you're going to go forward.
Thank you, Ariel. Because of time, I'm going to have to ask you, Ariel, to talk with Iram after the panel when we have our break. And I'm going to give this to Tina to talk about the Marshall Islands and how you feel about the ban treaty and how it affected you.
I'm going to actually look to somebody in our audience who probably is better qualified to answer that question than myself. Although there was some discussion when I was back to this conference, but John Burroughs, would you like to step in on that?
Just let me, again, as moderator, John, you're going to have a chance to talk at the... Okay, yeah, I know that we're running a little bit late, so you are going to get the answer, Ariel. You're going to have to stay longer. So, because John Burroughs will be speaking to that. Okay, so let's bring up the next panel. I hope let's get the list of who you are and get your names up here.